Event that shocked the world and changed the course of America's history. The new book about the assassination of John F. Kennedy is called End of Days, and it's written by New York Times best-selling author of Manhunt, James Swanson. James, welcome to Big 550 KTRS here in St. Louis.
Thanks, McGraw.
This book is being called the definitive account of what happened, and in my reading it says a minute-by-minute account. Excruciating detail for a writer, isn't it?
Well, it is, but that's the kind of book I wanted to write because I found that most people have forgotten what happened that day. We've been so distracted by wild conspiracy theories, we've forgotten the true facts of that day. So I decided to write this book as a true crime thriller, an exciting, cinematic, and ultimately terrifying and sad, hour by hour, minute by minute, and sometimes even split-second by split-second account of what happened in Dallas. It's really a split-screen view of the ticking clock of Lee Harvey Oswald and of John F. Kennedy as the last days and last hours count down to their fatal encounter on the streets of Dallas, Texas.
The conspiracy theorists will tell us that there's still a lot unknown about what happened that day.
Well, we know so much of what happened. We know it was Oswald. We know he bought the rifle. We know he tried to use it to murder an Army general 7 months before he killed President Kennedy. We know he brought that rifle to work that morning. We know that the shots came from the book depository. 3 men sitting in the 5th floor windows right below Oswald heard the shots. They heard the empty brass cartridge cases bounce on the floor above their heads. Oswald was the only worker who fled the building that day. And then, shortly after, he murdered a policeman in cold blood by shooting him 4 times. And then when the police converged to capture Oswald inside a movie theater, he pulled that same pistol and tried to shoot them. To this day, no real evidence and no hard facts have shown that it was not Lee Harvey Oswald who didn't fire those shots from the Texas School Book Depository. No hard facts have shown that he worked with others or that others were involved. That's where it stands today. We know a lot more than the Warren Commission did. We know more facts. We have better science and better technology. The case against Lee Harvey Oswald gets stronger over time, not weaker. But that's not really the point of the book. I really want to focus on the drama of what happened. Shakespeare couldn't have written this. The twists and turns, any of which could have gone a different way, would have saved John Kennedy that day. One fact going this way versus that way, the president's life would have been saved. So it's really a suspenseful drama because John Kennedy didn't have to die. Oswald didn't have to succeed. It didn't have to happen this way. Anything could have happened. And if only one little fact had changed, John F. Kennedy might have been spared that day.
Did he say that day that riding in an open-air convertible, anybody can kill the president?
Well, JFK had an eerie premonition that he discussed with Jackie in their hotel room. They were in Fort Worth, Texas. They were about to fly to Dallas and then get in that fateful motorcade that would take them down Elm Street. And JFK said 2 things about his death that morning. First, he said, about their arrival the previous night, he said, Jackie, last night would have been a hell of a night to assassinate a president. It was dark, it was raining, the crowd was pressing in, we were getting jostled. Any man could have pulled a pistol from a briefcase and shot me and run away into the night. And then he said another thing, Jackie. Nothing would stop a man with a rifle in a tall building from assassinating me. So why worry about it? Little did President Kennedy know that as he spoke those words to his wife, there was already a man in a tall building with a rifle waiting for him to get on that plane and waiting for him to drive in that motorcade past the Texas School Book Depository.
How do we know that? Did she admit that later?
She said it later to an early journalist covering the event, and also some of JFK's top aides were in the room with him, and they also participated in that discussion. So we know that's what the president said.
The book is called End of Days, The Assassination of John F. Kennedy. James Swanson, the author, also the author of the New York Times best-selling book, which was a great read called Manhunt, about the Lincoln assassination and the hunt for his killers. Doing this minute by minute, how did you go about doing this? I mean, the resources are endless. How did you pare it down, James?
Well, I did the book by massive immersion into the sources: television news, newspapers, radio reports, eyewitness testimony, stories, autobiographies, and other materials written by all the participants, talking to some of the people who were there, newsmen, people who knew the Kennedys, some of the Secret Service agents. There's a huge variety of resources to call upon. And the real challenge is picking the best ones, because I wanted to share with readers the stories they've never heard, the facts they didn't know about, to make it as exciting as possible. And also, much of the story turns on these unknown facts. And so that's really how I did the book.
Yeah. You also try and get into the psyche of Oswald as to find out why he wanted to do something like this. We don't know, do we, ultimately, why he wanted to do this?
Well, I think we do know. Oswald wanted to be remembered. He was a lifelong malcontent wherever he was. As a teenager, as a failed U.S. Marine, as a would-be defector to the Soviet Union who later hated Russia and communism, as a disciple of Fidel Castro in the Cuban Revolution. Oswald's wife once said, Lee would be happy nowhere, maybe on the moon. She knew he had lifelong delusions of grandeur. Killing President Kennedy was his way of being remembered. And it worked. On the 50th anniversary, we're talking about Lee Harvey Oswald and conspiracy theories and wild tales more than we're talking about John Kennedy.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important for this 50th anniversary to remember what really happened, the real facts. A wife lost her husband, 2 children lost their father, a nation lost its president. We should be thinking about John Kennedy and who he was and what his life represents on this 50th anniversary time. Kennedy once said, one man can make a difference, and every man should try. He was a great optimist who believed in America's greatness. He believed in America's exceptionalism. He believed that Americans could do anything, that we should try anything. And we should remember that's what he stood for on the anniversary of his death.
We also look at it at a different world. We saw Jackie Kennedy grow up, get old, and die. We saw John grow up and move on. We saw Carolyn grow up, but those images of John F. Kennedy are etched forever as him as a 46-year-old man.
Yes, exactly. John F. Kennedy is eternally a young, vibrant, vital man. We never saw him grow old. We never saw him die of natural causes. He's fixed in time as a vibrant, optimistic, great American leader. That's why, even though it was 50 years ago, it seems like yesterday.
Yeah.
He haunts us still to this very day.
I was in Dealey Plaza last summer, maybe 2 summers ago, and I saw the X's in the street. I also went and visited the book depository again for the 2nd or 3rd time. But of all the things that upset me, James Swanson, the author of this new book, End of Days, was the charlatan off in the corner trying to sell his book for $19.95, talking to a couple of Americans, trying to convince them that there's some giant conspiracy. That's what upset me most of all.
Well, you're right to be upset. Dealey Plaza is a fascinating place. The Texas School Book Depository 6th floor museum is a great museum. It really tells the story of JFK's life, not the assassination, in a very respectful way. A couple things about Dealey Plaza. First, when you look out that 6th floor window, you'll see how close the area is. Mm-hmm. You'll see how easy it was for Oswald to make that shot. That wasn't the shot of a lifetime. It was close. He was trained in the Marine Corps to shoot like that. It's obvious that it was an easy shot. Secondly, Dealey Plaza is a place of harmonic convergence. It seems all the conspiracy buffs in the world gather there. They certainly gather there once a year, as though somehow that'll show the truth or explain the truth. We know the truth. It was Oswald. All the evidence points to that. His psychology, his temperament, the facts of his life, the facts of the assassination, the first-day evidence of the crime, it all points to Lee Harvey Oswald. And yet, any day you go there, you can find people selling gruesome bootleg autopsy photographs of President Kennedy. On an American street, people are selling autopsy photographs of the dead president. They're selling books containing wild theories of what might have happened that day. In my opinion, what really happened couldn't have even been written by Shakespeare. The true facts of this case are far more exotic and compelling than any conspiracy theory that cannot be proven or has not been proven to this day. We know so much more than the Warren Commission did. They got the central conclusion right. It was Oswald. There were 3 shots fired from the book depository, and that's what killed the president. But advances in science and technology make the case even stronger against Oswald. Once upon a time, everyone believed that the world was flat. And I suspect that 100 years from now, people will say, can you believe there was once a time when people didn't believe that it was Lee Harvey Oswald?
The book is called End of Days, The Assassination of John F. Kennedy. James Swanson, our guest, New York Times bestselling author. What happened on Air Force One on the flight back to Washington that changed America?
That's where the Kennedy myth began, created by Jacqueline Kennedy. She refused to change out of that bright pink suit. Before the photograph was taken of her posing with Lyndon Johnson, and he was sworn in as the new president, women went to Jackie and said, change your clothes, you've got blood all over you. Jackie said, no, I want them to see what they've done. I will not change my clothes. Later, Jackie said, I went to the mirror in the bathroom of the president's quarters, and I looked at myself. My face, my hair, my husband's blood and brains were all over me. I took a tissue and wiped it from my face to pose for that photograph. I wish I hadn't done that. I should have left all the blood on. People needed to see what had been done. She wore that suit all day, and that began the Kennedy legend. She wouldn't leave his coffin. She sat by it the whole way back. Lyndon Johnson became a new kind of president on that plane, and one of the other things that happened was there was a split on that plane between the aides to Lyndon Johnson and the aides to John Kennedy. They hated LBJ. They'd always hated him. They were snobbish New England elites who thought LBJ was a poorly educated hick from the hill country of Texas. They mocked him. Robert Kennedy tortured Lyndon Johnson. That made Lyndon Johnson want to carry out Kennedy's legacy even more. One of the reasons LBJ took us so deep into Vietnam is he really believed he was carrying out JFK's policies because he had been so hounded and harassed by JFK's followers who told him he was unworthy of JFK's legacy. That's one of the interesting twists that happened on that ride back on that plane. And of course, on the plane, Jackie Kennedy decided already, my husband's funeral is going to be just like Abraham Lincoln. I'm going to honor him that way. And that helped create the legend of John Kennedy.
They're calling it the definitive book of the assassination of John F. Kennedy 50 years ago this month. The book is called The End of Days. James Swanson, New York Times bestselling writer. Thank you very much for your time. Good luck down the road, and thanks for spending a couple minutes with us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You got it. The book is End of Days, The Assassination of John F. Kennedy. James Swanson, our guest. Back in a moment, KT.